There are people who watch the calendar turn to a very specific date each year and feel absolutely nothing at all. They do not wake up with a surge of anticipation, they do not check their phones eagerly for messages, and they do not feel the sudden magical shift in the atmosphere that society insists they should feel. It is not a day of bitter mourning for them, but it is certainly not a day of vibrant celebration either. They simply wake up, pour their morning coffee, and carry a strange, silent heaviness in their chest. This heaviness does not come from the fact that they are getting older, but from the exhausting, invisible weight of everyone else's expectations. They feel the bizarre, unnameable pressure of having to perform joy, of having to prove their existence matters through loud rooms and forced smiles, when all they truly want is for the world to simply look away and let them exist in peace. You have probably been told your entire life that treating your birthday like a normal Tuesday means you are secretly depressed, overly cynical, or perhaps quietly begging for someone to throw you a surprise party. You have likely sat in rooms where well-meaning friends or family members try to drag you into the spotlight, pulling you forcefully out of your peaceful, carefully constructed orbit. And more often than not, you went along with it because the emotional cost of refusing their enthusiasm felt far heavier than the exhausting cost of pretending to enjoy it. The profound social exhaustion that comes with being the center of attention is something the loudest parts of the world will fundamentally never understand. For a highly sensitive mind, a birthday is not just an innocent gathering. It is a massive sensory and emotional performance that requires an immense amount of cognitive energy. You are forced to process dozens of micro-interactions, to perfectly calibrate your facial expressions to gifts you might not even want, and to carefully manage the fragile feelings of the people who organize the celebration for you. You are not merely attending a party. You are actively holding up the emotional architecture of the entire room, ensuring that everyone else feels good about making you feel good. This is where most people get it wrong. Your lack of desire to celebrate is not a symptom of a defective personality, but a defining hallmark of an incredibly efficient and self-regulating neurological system. Let us look at a profound concept in psychology known as the prediction error mechanism, deeply tied to how our brains process dopamine and external rewards. In a world entirely designed for extroverts, the human brain is constantly conditioned to expect external validation. But for the introverted mind, the nervous system registers these external, high-intensity stimuli not as joyous rewards, but as sudden threats to its delicate internal equilibrium. Think of your nervous system as a finely tuned, highly sensitive instrument, or perhaps a deep-cycle social battery that operates best on a low-voltage, steady, and predictable current. Your brain does not need the loud, external validation of a party because it has already optimized itself for profound internal regulation. Perhaps in your past, your expectations for this specific day were not met, and the painful gap between what you quietly hoped for and what actually happened created a deep psychological friction. Your highly intelligent brain recognized this friction immediately. It realized that outsourcing your joy to an unpredictable external environment was an incredibly inefficient way to find peace. So, your mind beautifully adapted. It internalized your sense of worth, pulling it away from the unpredictable hands of society and placing it safely within your own control. And then comes the part that changes everything. When you look at self-determination theory, psychologists found that the most psychologically healthy people are the ones whose happiness comes from within, not from external events, not from social rituals, and definitely not from a song you never asked people to sing at you in a restaurant. People in this group stepped off the hedonic treadmill. They do not need a calendar to remind them they matter, and they do not need a loud room to feel whole. If this sounds like the explanation you have been searching for your entire life, welcome to quiet psychology. This is a space for those who prefer the calm to the crowd, a sanctuary where we look beyond the noise to truly understand the brilliant, quiet mechanics of the introverted mind. You do not need to perform here, you do not need to pretend, and you just need to listen and finally exhale. If we go one layer deeper, the reality of this societal pressure becomes intensely, almost suffocatingly physical. I remember a very specific evening in late autumn, just a few years ago. It was my birthday, and I found myself sitting at the dead center of a long, dimly lit table in a crowded, intensely echoing restaurant. The walls of the room were vibrating with the heavy bass of the background music, and the air was incredibly thick, heavy with the scent of roasted food and entirely too many competing perfumes. There were 15 people gathered around me, their faces flushed with wine and laughter, all leaning in, their expectant eyes fixed precisely on my face. They were toasting, raising their glass in unison, smiling with genuine affection. But as I sat there at the head of the table, all I could feel was the oxygen rapidly leaving the room. My heart was beating a frantic, chaotic rhythm against my ribs, and my skin felt entirely too tight, as if I were wearing a suit made of lead. I was nodding, mechanically stretching my mouth into the socially acceptable shape of gratitude, but behind my eyes my mind was frantically searching for the nearest exit. The sharp noise of the silverware clinking against the ceramic plates sounded like shattering glass inside my ears. I quietly excused myself to the restroom, walked down the narrow hallway, locked the heavy wooden door behind me, and leaned my forehead against the cold, beautifully quiet tiles of the wall. In that solitary moment, completely stripped of the watching eyes and the heavy expectations, my nervous system finally stopped spinning. I realized right then, looking at my tired, overstimulated reflection in the harsh fluorescent light, that my presence at that table was a costly emotional performance I could no longer afford to fund. I did not want the cake, I did not want the song, and I certainly did not want the attention. I just wanted the profound, serene silence of my own living room. That quiet realization is the very thing that sets you completely free. For years, you have carried the exhausting tension of trying to be normal, of trying to mirror the loud enthusiasm that society aggressively demands of you on this one specific day. You honestly thought your deep desire to retreat, to treat the day as if it were entirely unremarkable, was a fatal flaw in your psychological wiring. But let me give you the quiet truth that changes the narrative entirely. Refusing to perform your own existence is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of the most radical intelligence a quiet mind can possess. You are bravely stepping off the endless, exhausting treadmill of forced jubilation, protecting your inner peace on a day that society loudly claims as a public event is never, ever an act of selfishness. It is an act of deep, necessary, and beautiful preservation. Do not let them call your firm boundaries isolation. It is intentional, empowering solitude. Do not let them label your quietness as a cold wall. It is careful, deliberate, and healthy selection. Do not let them convince you that you are hiding from life. You are actively engaged in the sacred, necessary act of self-protection. You have successfully built a life where your fundamental value is not tied to a single, exhausting annual performance, but is woven quietly and securely into the fabric of your everyday existence. Your mind is a quiet, sacred sanctuary, and you have the absolute authority to keep the doors closed whenever you wish. And as you wake up on that day, pouring your morning coffee in the perfect, uninterrupted silence of your own company, breathing in the calm air of your own space, know that you are exactly where you are supposed to be. You do not need to loudly celebrate the day you were born, because you have finally learned how to truly, quietly live in peace.